When my son Eric told me he and his girlfriend had decided to keep things simple, I believed him. For months he'd said they weren't rushing, that money was tight, that a wedding could wait. So when I called him one Saturday morning to ask if he wanted to come over for lunch, I wasn't prepared for his answer. "Mom, I can't," he said awkwardly. "We're flying out tonight." "Flying where?" I asked. There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. "Actually, we're getting married in Aruba." The world tilted. "Married?" I whispered. "Tonight?" "Yes, just close family," he added quickly, as if that would soften the blow. "Close family." I stared at the checkbook open in front of me, the one I had used just 2 days earlier to cover his car insurance. I thought of the $600 I'd wired last month when his fiancée Julia said their electricity was about to be shut off. I thought of the emergency credit card still in my name, the furniture I'd bought for their apartment, the refrigerator I stocked every Sunday. "And me?" I finally asked. "Am I not close family?" He didn't answer. Someone in the background, Julia, laughed and said, not softly enough, "She'll understand. She always does." Eric didn't contradict her. They flew out that night. I saw the photos online the next day. A beach ceremony, champagne, Julia's parents hugging the newlyweds. Her sister had been the maid of honor. Everyone looked radiant in the sunset. I wasn't there. The blue dress I'd bought for the eventual wedding stayed folded in my closet, tags still on. I imagined standing proudly beside my only child. Instead, I was watching strangers celebrate a life milestone I'd helped pay for, but wasn't allowed to witness. 5 days later, Julia called. Her voice was urgent, strained. "Marianne, the rent bounced. The landlord's furious. Did the transfer not go through?" I held the phone away from my ear for a second and just breathed. For 10 years after my husband died, I believed being needed meant being loved. I confused silence with gratitude, obligation with affection. I told myself it was temporary, until Eric got stable, until they were on their feet. But feet that never walk without leaning are not weak. They are entitled. "Julia," I said calmly, "I'm not making transfers anymore." "What?" Her voice sharpened. "Why?" "Because," I replied, "because I found out I'm not family, only a sponsor." Eric called next, then texted, then called again. When I didn't answer, they showed up at my house that evening with an unfamiliar man in a suit. I let them in because I didn't yet know how strong I was allowed to be. The man introduced himself as a legal consultant. "We're worried about your recent behavior. Cutting us off like this isn't like you." Julia sighed dramatically. "At your age, sudden financial decisions can be a sign of confusion." That's when I understood. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about losing access. I asked them to leave. When they refused, I called the police. My hands shook, but my voice did not. The next morning, I changed the locks. That week, I met with a lawyer. I closed joint accounts. I removed co-signatures. I rewrote my will. With every signature, I felt 10 pounds lighter. They tried everything afterward: guilt, threats, even a formal letter suggesting I undergo a mental evaluation. I complied voluntarily and passed it easily. When the court dismissed their complaint, Eric didn't call to apologize. He never called at all. Months passed. I started painting again. I joined a local book club. I spent money on groceries I actually liked. I slept through the night for the first time in years. I don't know if my son ever missed me or just the money. But I learned something vital far too late, and yet just in time. Love that requires payment is not love. Family that sees you as an asset will always try to own you. And dignity once reclaimed is worth every lonely moment it takes to get there. If I were asked what I'd do in this person's place, I'd choose myself sooner. I'd document everything. I'd set boundaries without apologizing, and I'd remember that growing old does not mean growing disposable. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is stop giving and start living.